What if I told you the history you thought you knew is a lie? That a little crucially important point always gets swept under the rug. You would all be very well aware of the Septim Dynasty, correct? The dynasty of emperors that ruled Tamriel for all of the Third Era, the dynasty that Tiber Septim himself started. Yes, that one. So the truth is, the game was rigged from the start, and that pretty much 95% of all Septim emperors have not descended from Tiber Septim. Contrary to the images and ideas portrayed in games like Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, the idea of this Dragonborn bloodline and divine lineage, it's all a bit of a meme. What is up, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Scott from Fudge Muppet, and today I'm here to explain how the Septim Dynasty didn't even really descend from Tiber Septim, and also about the Dragonblood itself. So it might be best to first get everyone up to speed on the Septim Dynasty so you can see how most Septim emperors are not really descendants of Tiber Septim, but on a more technical level, it would be more accurate to say that the Septim Dynasty has descended from Tiber Septim's father. So we all know the Third Era opens up with Tiber Septim having conquered the entirety of Tamriel, bringing it under one whole empire. He ruled this unified land for 38 years before his death, outliving his son and leaving his empire to be ruled by his grandson Pelagius Septim I. Pelagius Septim was said to be a strong ruler, but his reign would be cut short after a mere 3 years. While kneeling and praying in the Temple of the One, he would be assassinated by the Dark Brotherhood. Pelagius Septim I had no children to take up the throne, and as a result, the throne would have to be traced back in the family tree. The throne would go to Tiber Septim's brother, Agnerith, if he were alive, but since he was not, the throne would go to Agnerith's daughter, Kintyra, being crowned Empress Kintyra I. Only one of the 20 rulers that came after Tiber Septim could truly claim lineage of Tiber Septim, and Kintyra Septim I is where the rest of the Septim Dynasty descends from. Kintyra's uncle was Tiber Septim, but her father was Agnerith. So to put it crudely, none of the Septim Dynasty, with the exception of Pelagius I, came from Tiber Septim's balls. So the common ancestor that the entire Septim Dynasty shares is the father of Agnerith and Tiber Septim, rather than Tiber Septim himself. So this calls into question, how does this whole Dragonborn bloodline thing work? Well, it is a bit trickier and less plain than a simple Dragonborn genetic bloodline. It's all closely intertwined with the workings of Akatosh and an ancient pact between Alesia and the dragon god of time. I mean, straight away you may realize that there have been 3 unrelated dynasties of Dragonborn emperors: Slave Queen Alesia and her descendants, Emperor Riemann and his descendants, and then Tiber Septim and his descendants. The Book of the Dragonborn, written by Prior Emmeline Madrine, a member of the Order of Talos that lived during the reign of Pelagius Septim IV, who is the father of Uriel Septim VII, details some very important information that provides clarity on the issue. Most scholars agree that the term Dragonborn was first used in connection with the Covenant of Akatosh, when the blessed Saint Alesia was given the Amulet of Kings and the dragon fires in the Temple of the One were first lit. Akatosh, looking with pity upon the plight of men, drew precious blood from his own heart and blessed Saint Alesia with this blood of dragons, and made a covenant that so long as Alesia's generations were true to the dragon blood, Akatosh would endeavor to seal tight the gates of Oblivion and to deny the armies of Daedra and undead to their enemies, the Daedra-loving Aelids. Those blessed by Akatosh with the dragon blood became known more simply as Dragonborn. The connection with the rulers of the empire was thus there from the beginning. Only those of the dragon blood were able to wear the Amulet of Kings and light the dragon fires. All the legitimate rulers of the empire have been Dragonborn: the emperors and empresses of the First Cyrodiilic Empire founded by Alesia, Riemann Cyrodiil and his heirs, and of course Tiber Septim and his heirs, down to our current emperor, His Majesty Pelagius Septim IV. Because of this connection with the emperors, however, the other significance of the Dragonborn has been obscured and largely forgotten by all but scholars and those of us dedicated to the service of the blessed Talos, who was Tiber Septim. Very few realize that being Dragonborn is not a simple matter of heredity, being the blessing of Akatosh himself. It is beyond our understanding exactly how and why it is bestowed. Those who become emperor and light the dragon fires are surely Dragonborn. The proof is in the wearing of the amulet and the lighting of the fires. But were they Dragonborn and thus able to do these things? Or was the doing the sign of the blessing of Akatosh descending upon them? All we can say is that it is both and neither, a divine mystery. The line of Septims have all been Dragonborn, of course, which is one reason the simplistic notion of it being hereditary has become so commonplace. But we know for certain that the early Cyrodiilic rulers were not all related. There is no evidence that Riemann Cyrodiil was descended from Alesia, although there are many legends that would make it so, most of them dating from the time of Riemann and likely attempts to legitimize his rule. We know that the Blades, usually thought of as the Emperor's bodyguards, originated in Akaviri Crusaders who invaded Tamriel for obscure reasons in the late First Era. They appear to have been searching for Dragonborn. The events at Pale Pass bear this out, and the Akaviri were the first to proclaim Riemann Cyrodiil as Dragonborn. In fact, it was the Akaviri who did the most to promote his standing as Emperor, although Riemann himself never took that title in his lifetime. And of course, there is no known hereditary connection between Tiber Septim and any of the previous Dragonborn rulers of Tamriel. So to summarize these passages from the Book of the Dragonborn, Dragonborn lineage seems to be a divine blessing rather than a hereditary genetic bloodline. To help this make a little more sense, consider that for starters, Tiber Septim, the Dragonborn, has his genetic bloodline ended at Pelagius I, and yet Kintyra, his niece, was able to wear the Amulet of Kings and light the Dragonfires. This is because Akatosh blessed her with the Dragonborn blood at her coronation. If the Dragonborn lineage was genetic, then there could potentially be hundreds of Dragonborns running around. If a Dragonborn emperor was to have 5 children and they had 5 children each, and they each had 5 children more, you would end up with 125 Dragonborn descendants in only 3 generations. Theoretically, you could never run out of Dragonborn to fill the throne and light the Dragonfires. However, this is why I believe that one is not born with the dragon blood, but instead is blessed with it at their coronation at Akatosh's discretion. Which brings up further more interesting points, considering then the amount that Akatosh actually interferes with Tamriel politics in a very direct way. Akatosh at some point created the first Dragonborn of each imperial dynasty. So at first he created the pact with Alesia, her line eventually ended, and at some point Akatosh chose to bestow the blessing of Dragonblood upon Riemann, a seemingly random selection. And then Akatosh chose Tiber Septim centuries later, another seemingly random choice. So Akatosh, in the act of bestowing the Dragonblood, has decided who shall start each dynasty and each incarnation of the Empire, and has seemingly allowed their descendants to receive that same blessing. Which does beg the question of the last Dragonborn. What is his role? Could he become the next inheritor of Tamriel's throne, the next emperor, creator of a new dynasty? How is his or her situation any different to that of Tiber Septim or Riemann Cyrodiil? Riemann nor Tiber could claim any Dragonborn lineage. They were seemingly random people picked by Akatosh to receive the dragon blood. So theoretically, the last Dragonborn, that is, if he isn't truly the last Dragonborn, could potentially have children who are blessed by Akatosh as well, creating a new Dragonborn dynasty. However, on the contrary, it does not seem like it is as necessary since the veil between Oblivion and Nirn is sealed shut. You see, before, each dynasty since Alesia has used the Amulet of Kings and lit the Dragonfires to keep Oblivion from accessing the mortal realm, but with Martin Septim sacrificing himself at the end of the Oblivion crisis and destroying the Amulet of Kings, he sealed the veil forever. So perhaps Akatosh acts as a protector against the destruction of Mundus, first by instituting the pact with Alesia, and the following Dragonborn dynasties protecting against forces of Daedra from Oblivion, but also, later when Alduin came to consume the world, by choosing the last Dragonborn and allowing him to defeat Alduin for good. But since Alduin is gone, perhaps there is no need for any future Dragonborn, perhaps until some other major crisis that threatens the destruction of Nirn comes about. So how do you guys feel about all this? Did you guys know that most of the Septim Dynasty didn't really come from Tiber Septim? What do you think about the realization of Dragonblood and how really Akatosh plays a huge part in who has it and who doesn't, rather than just a genetic bloodline? Thanks so much for watching, guys. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Dragonblood below. Like the video if you enjoyed it and you thought it was interesting. My name is Scott and I'll be back to nerd out with you again next time.